Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate. In this video, we're going to be giving the latest information on potential Hurricane Henri as it moves up the East Coast and threatens places of New England. There has already been hurricane watches issued within some of those areas, and so we will be giving the latest information on that. We will also be discussing recently re-intensified Hurricane Grace as that threatens places near the southern portions of the Bay of Campeche in Mexico. And then we'll be giving a little overview as to what you could potentially see tonight within the severe weather risk in the northern plains. So if you guys are new to my channel, please be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family and on social media. Also follow me on social media. Link will be in the description down below. Of course, for the best information, please go to the National Hurricane Center, the Storm Prediction Center, or your local weather forecasting offices for more detail. You can see here in the visible satellite imagery, right here is Henri, right here is Grace, and then the potential severe weather event lasting from all the way through last night continues to linger here into the northern portions of the United States. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Henri first, and so we're going to take a look at that visible satellite, and you can see this giant counterclockwise swirl within the clouds here, within this giant ball of mass of thunderstorm activity, with the exception of this outflow, this ventilation from the storm higher up in the atmosphere, which seems to be looking like this is a very healthy tropical system. The only thing about it is that it seems to be not exactly vertically aligned. You can see the low-level circulation with these clouds closer and closer towards the surface ended up being right about here. That's around the center of low pressure system for where it's at the surface. And then right about here seems to be the mid-level circulation noted in most of this convection and the swirling mass around that as well. And so if this could become a lot more vertically aligned, we could be talking about a potential hurricane that could continue to move on through. You can also see the outline in regards to where this is. Right here is the outline of the Carolinas. So right about here is where Myrtle Beach and Wilmington is on the top left-hand part of your screen. But the big thing here is that whether or not this thing can become vertically aligned again, because before it wasn't exactly dealing with as much shear coming out from the north. And because there was a lot of wind shear, a lot of these upper level winds that were pushing this storm and becoming, making the storm a little bit more displaced. That was the reason why we've got to this predicament. But as of right now, the shear has gone away and it is expected to kind of shed that disorganization and become a lot more organized as it continues to move on through. If we take a look at the water vapor imagery, it gives us a little bit of a zoomed out view as to what all is happening around it. You can see that a lot of the wind shear is now actually moved further off to the south of Henri, and that's the reason why a lot of these clouds, these showers and thunderstorms on the southern side have actually shot down really quickly to the south. You can see actually with that, with how quickly these clouds are moving down here, but then if you look at the top of Henri, those clouds aren't exactly moving a whole lot. So that goes to show you that this trend of shear has actually moved off a bit further towards the south and away, so that Henri could potentially intensify again. You also have this big trough that's moving on through here, this massive low pressure system that's going to be really impacting the track of Henri. And depending upon the placement of that low pressure system, you could potentially be talking about areas further west of the hurricane watches or further east of the hurricane watches to where Henri could potentially be making landfall. Now, the National Hurricane Center's forecast cone is really interesting here because through the past 2 days, it has continuously tracked further and further west. But the other thing to note here is that it actually has it as a hurricane a lot later than it originally forecasted. So the expected intensity of this tropical system is a little bit weaker than it originally was thought, but nevertheless, it's still expected to create major impacts up here in places of New England and New York, specifically around the Cape Cod, Nantucket, and Martha's Vineyard area, which is the reason why there is hurricane warnings that are most likely expected to be in place there within the next couple of days. But hurricane watches and tropical storm watches have been issued, outlined in this light pink and light yellow highlighter along that coastal area. Right now, it's a tropical storm, but it is expected to intensify into a hurricane between the time period of Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon. And how that progresses and how that intensifies as it gets further and further north is the big question here. And so, if this thing can intensify a lot stronger than the National Hurricane Center thinks, we could be potentially talking about just more than just a hurricane landfall here within the Northeast. But if this thing does continue to weaken as it has been shown on some of the models, we're going to be talking about a potential tropical storm landfall up here, but it'd be a high-end tropical storm with about 65-mile-per-hour sustained winds to 70-mile-per-hour sustained winds. Taking a look at the HWRF model, we can actually see what I was talking about on satellite imagery. Note the contours as the lower level circulation and the big ball mass here of green as the mid-level circulation. So right about there in the middle is where that would actually be. And you can see how displaced it actually is on the models here from the HWRF. But as this continues to progress further and further, it fixes that issue really quickly. And by tonight, Friday evening into Saturday morning, this could potentially wrap itself fully and become vertically aligned. And that's a big key contributor to whether or not this will continue to intensify further. And according to most of the models, that does seem to be the case as it continues to head off further to the north. We can also move this over to the regular HWRF model and take a look at the radar imagery on its approach to Long Island and New England. And you can see as this continues to move up further to the north, this model actually tracks this a little bit further to the west and places near eastern portions of Long Island. Most likely will get the landfall first before it heads up into Connecticut. But regardless as to whether or not it makes landfall over here or makes landfall over here, heavy amounts of storm surge is anticipated, and due to the fact that it is also expected to meander through the New England vicinity within a span of 24 hours and basically just almost become stationary, we can expect some widespread threats for flash flooding. Continuous amounts of rain is expected from this storm. And you can even see that this thing is expected to sit over the area because it goes into the general vicinity of New York City, Albany, right around the Hudson River Valley area, and just kind of sits over there and creates a lot of rain for the most part. And then by Tuesday morning, it actually starts to move back out over water and out towards sea again. So that's a big concern here as to whether or not these areas will get a lot more rain than anticipated, a lot less rain, a lot more storm surge. Amounts here from the preliminary results of the models still say that it won't be as much rain, but these what typically happens within the next couple of days within that time span is that it most likely will increase as the models continue to become fine-tuned. And so as this gets towards Sunday evening, which is around the time in which this potentially makes landfall, Sunday afternoon into Sunday evening, this will most likely create an absorbent amount of rain from 2 to even 6 inches as possible. And I could even foresee a lot more yellows within this area, maybe even an orange or two within some localized amounts. The big threat here is going to be the storm surge. You can see across the board here that there is expected to be an absorbent amount of storm surge, specifically around Cape Cod, Nantucket Sound, all the way down towards Long Island, even expected to be pretty high towards the Long Island Sound as well. And from Cape May all the way up towards East Rockaway Inlet, 1 to 3 feet of storm surge is expected. So on the minimal amounts, but that's most likely because it is on that western side. My apologies, that western side of the tropical system on the approach. But then as it continues to get further north and north, you can see the amounts of storm surge actually increase. It goes from 2 to 4 feet of storm surge expected along the Long Island Sound to 3 to 5 feet of storm surge expected over here towards the Nantucket Sound. And I'm actually anticipating that to increase more and more because there is going to be high tide around this general vicinity. And so this is really something that we got to watch out for as this continues to progress further and further to the north. And as this system does get closer and closer to the coastline. Another thing here to note is that the waters within Henri are actually relatively warm. They're actually in upwards of almost 30 degrees Celsius in some areas. And because Henri, which is particularly stationed right about here, is going to be heading off north along this Gulf Stream, which comes from the Gulf of Mexico and parallels along the coast of the eastern portions of the United States. It'll be staying within those relatively warm waters, but then once it starts to head almost due east of the Delmarva Peninsula, it will start to encounter them very unfavorable waters, very cold waters that you typically see further off to the north. And so it is expected to gradually weaken from that point once it continues to move off further to the north. And that's the reason why it's not expected to continue to maintain its peak intensity once it's over these very warm waters. So that is the good news from this actual overall system. One final thing that I do want to discuss here is why the track of Henri is actually tracking towards New England. And there's a couple main contributors here. First off, one of which ends up being a low pressure system that we talked about on satellite imagery that is currently located somewhere over West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. And that is anticipated to actually move further to the south and east. So as Henri moves further north, the pathway of this trough here and the wind shear actually guides it towards that general direction. But then what happens as Henri continues to pass here, Henri indicated in this red area here with the low pressure system symbol, is that the wind shear starts to shift, and instead of it going this way as the pathway for the wind shear now ends up moving in this general direction right here, and Henri most likely will follow that particular track as it continues to move on through. And you also have a ridge which is located right about here. You can see the counterclockwise spin in the wind shear within this general vicinity. And so this guidance here from both this low pressure on the western side and the high pressure on the eastern side is most likely going to channel it right within this general vicinity right about here. And so that most likely will be the potential landfall space of this tropical system, depending upon where this low pressure system and the high pressure system is located. That will determine as to how far east or west the system actually makes landfall. Now, if we take a look over to Grace, really interesting here from Grace over the past 24 hours, because before it was looking like this tropical storm wasn't exactly doing a whole lot. Now this tropical storm has become a very powerful hurricane, an 85-mile-per-hour hurricane at that, so a mid to high-end category 1, and it is expected to intensify as it continues to move closer and closer towards the Mexico coast. Here is the Yucatan Peninsula. Here's the coastline of Mexico as it continues to move on through. Tampico is right over here somewhere. I do not know my geography very well with Mexico, but regardless, this tropical system is expected to continue to move off to the west. The very deep convection ongoing within the storm, and unfortunately the satellite imagery continues to jump between specific positions, so I can't exactly show you specifically as to what I'm talking about. If I pause this image right there, you can actually see some of these bits and bobs of thunderstorms actually overshoot the main level of thunderstorms. We call those overshooting tops, which can indicate very, very active areas of deep convection, very strong thunderstorm activity, I should say, within some of this, some of the portions of Grace. Looking at the water vapor imagery, as I mentioned, that half of the satellite imagery is going to be kind of cut out because we're at the end of the satellite frame here. But you can see the environments around Grace similar to what we saw with Henri, and we can see a lot of this strong northeasterly shear that's continuously still steering the system into the coastline of Mexico. So that's the reason why this most likely will not head to the north. That seems to not be a factor here. But what is a factor is the shear still pushing it off to the south and west and moving off closer and closer to Mexico. It is also anticipated that the remnants of Grace, after it does make impacts, to head off further into the Pacific and potentially create another tropical system that moves on through over there. So definitely something to watch out for as that continues to move on through. But as of right now, it is expected to continue to intensify as a very strong Category 1 hurricane on its approach. If we take a look at the cone of uncertainty, hurricane warnings have already been issued for the coastline of Mexico. It's expected to make landfall sometime around midnight on Central Daylight Time. So that's the reason why they have updated the cone that way. Hurricane warnings, as I mentioned, have been in effect for quite some time on the storm, and tropical storm warnings have been in effect further north of the system as well. So definitely something that we have to continue to watch out for as this continues to move on closer and closer. We don't really need to use the models at this point due to the fact that it is within 24 hours of the point here. And so we can just continue to use satellite guidance and hope for the best, and hope that the warnings have been enough for these people who are going to be impacted. Now, last but not least, I do want to talk about that severe weather threat in the northern plains, even into the central plains. And so we do have a 1 out of 5 on the severe weather scale here indicated in this dark green, and a 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale here indicated in this yellow. So if you guys do live within these areas, you guys got to go ahead and take your proper precautions and really monitor these storms. If you do have a warning, please heed it from the National Weather Service, whether it's a tornado warning, a severe thunderstorm warning, or a flash flood warning. All of those could potentially impact life and property, so we really need to watch out for that. 15% chance for 1-inch size hail or larger, and 15% chance for 58 mile per hour winds or greater within a 25-mile radius as possible. You also do have a 5% chance for tornadoes within a 25-mile radius located along this basically complex border here from the Dakotas and Minnesota all the way down into Iowa and down towards Topeka, Kansas. I'm actually anticipating the worst potential area for tornadic development to be here within western Iowa. The conditions seem to be a lot more favorable on the models for there to be something over there. And so I would definitely continue to watch out for that as that continues to progress later on tonight. If we take a look at the simulated reflectivity here from the North American model, the 3-kilometer version, we can take a look and see all sorts of stuff that actually happen here and progress. If you want to take a look at the timings, on the left-hand side, there's a time in Eastern Daylight Time because that is where I currently reside. So if you want to translate it to Central Daylight Time, you'd have to subtract an hour from it. But as this continues to move on through, from this morning into this afternoon, you can see the remnants of the severe weather threat from last night actually continue to linger, and that is what propagates this event here that starts to form in the early afternoon hours of 2 to 3 o'clock Central Daylight Time. You can even see some of these showers and thunderstorms already begin to form here from this system in northern portions of Minnesota, even in portions of the Dakotas. And then as this continues to move off into the evening hours, into the overnight hours, you can see how this materializes into not just one giant line here from the portions of the Dakotas down into Iowa, but you can also see some of the line of showers and thunderstorms that start to form across the board into Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. And that'll continue to consolidate into one massive line that starts to push on through with some scattered showers and thunderstorms expected in Oklahoma and Texas. And this will create a pretty strong damaging wind threat, as well as I mentioned, a localized tornado threat within some of these areas. And that is anticipated to continue to move on through as a very strong damaging wind threat into portions of Saturday and even Sunday. So I would continue to watch out for that as much as possible. That's going to be it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and turn on notifications. Share this with friends and family and on social media. Please stay tuned for the latest information coming out on these tropical systems and severe weather, as I do upload videos most likely every single day, as well as live streams very frequently, updating everyone on the current information. And I most likely will be live streaming the landfall of whatever the outcome of Henri ends up becoming. So please stay tuned for that, as I will be providing live analysis for whenever it does make landfall, if it does make landfall. Please stay safe out there, you guys, and if you do want the best information, please go to your National Hurricane Center, your Storm Prediction Center, and your local weather forecasting offices. Peace out, everyone.